In this lesson for task 3A, we're just going to look at some of the extra parts. Now we've got all of the bits in from the score and it's all sounding okay and it's kind of starting to take shape. But before we start our full-on mixing and mastering sessions, we need to really hone in and listen to the actual track and try and put in any of the areas that are missing. The first part that we need to listen for is any kind of special effects and sound effects. Now, there are a few. I'm going to show you two now, and I'm going to pinpoint a few areas where there's a few other things happening for you to kind of listen and do this job. But before I get that far, I just want to bring your attention to this website. This is a website called freesound.org, and it's absolutely fantastic. As the name implies, all the samples here are completely free, okay? And there are millions, absolutely millions. So you may find this very useful when you're sourcing sound effects, and I thoroughly recommend all of my students to get stuck in and come over to here. Now, as said previously, there's quite a lot happening, and the score hasn't covered everything. It's covered enough to get you some really good marks, but now's your chance to kind of get those extra marks. Start honing your skills, start honing your listening abilities. What I would say to you guys is listen to the track. I tend to loop each section at a time. And I know I said this to you guys at the beginning, but I tend to loop a section at a time, find anything, keep referring against their track, keep referring against my track, and see if there's anything missing. Once you've finished and you're happy, move on. And I tend to write notes for myself as I go along, just kind of say, okay, there's something happening here, and then I'll move on. This is a really good way of just kind of finding any missing parts or finding things that you need to improve on. The first two sound effects that I've come across is this reverse cymbal and this laser effect. Now, if you come over to bar 56, you're going to see, or bar 57, sorry, you're going to see that there's a laser effect that transitions into the bridge. So if you press the solo button and just listen, you'll hear the reverse cymbal effect, hopefully. Or if I just show you mine first, and you'll kind of hopefully hear what it should sound like. Okay, very subtle effect, just a kind of sound. So here's theirs. Okay, and that really is a nice transition between the parts. So yeah, you are going to need that reverse cymbal. So that's point number one. And once again, I just sourced this from freesound.org. You do have to obviously be careful now about the amount of audio tracks, but as this is not a continuous audio track, I don't see any reason why this kind of gets in the way of that particular part of the specification. So there's my first one. The second one, in my mind, is actually part of the synth that we looked at earlier. I believe it was synth 2, or it might have been synth 1, I can't remember. I think it was synth 2. And it was very hard to kind of create as part of that synth. So I thought to myself, even back then, actually, if I'm going to do this, I'm probably going to just use a sound effects to use that kind of laser drop sound, okay? So here's my sound, and see what you reckon. See if you can hear it in their mix. Okay, and let's play their one. Okay, so I need to change it. I have started looking at kind of just changing the pitch a little bit, and that's kind of helped, and I'll mix that in further. So there's just two to get you started, but there are other changes. Let me just list out a few that I've found so far for you to kind of identify. Now, those are my first two main ones. The next one, at bar 36, the actual bass sound gets a lot more grungy, kind of like dubstep kind of bass, where it's kind of like, it's really kind of, it's got some LFO in there that's kind of making it sound really grungy. Just have a listen. I try and change between maybe the earlier bass sound, and I try and change between when it actually happens. So here it is. There, did you hear it? Let me play it one more time. It's very, very grungy, and let me just play an earlier edition of that bass. And what's actually happening there is the LFO is just getting tighter. It's not spread apart so much, and it's giving this kind of a modulation effect that's really tight and kind of makes it sound grungy. So that's one thing you are going to have to consider when you do your automation, is actually there are LFO changes within it, and you've got a few ways of doing this. The first way would be to automate the LFO based on your bass track. Where is your bass track? Down here somewhere. There it is. Based on your bass track, you can automate the LFO. The second way is just to double your bass track up again and just kind of change it just for that section. Either way is completely acceptable as long as it blends well. The last part that I found so far is the actual phaser synth at bar 50 changes as well. So at bar 50, which is around here, the actual phaser sound on one of the synths has got more kind of definition. It's almost like it's playing some kind of lead instrument. So just have a listen to that. This will be the weekend when I'm gone, when I'm gone. And you can hear it's very defined. It's moved up in octave actually, or in pitch, just to kind of make it shine through the mix a little bit. And it's that phaser synth that we were looking at earlier. So there's another change that you might have to put in. But throughout the piece, there are these little subtle changes. And in order to get the top marks, you are going to have to do that. You are going to have to work those parts out. For me, though, that is me. This is where I'm leaving you guys now. So you guys have to work those final parts out. And in the next lesson, we're just going to look at some basic mixing techniques. And then in the final lesson, we're just going to look at some mastering techniques, just basic mastering techniques, and how to kind of make and export the track for your final CD. So good luck with those parts, and I'll see you in the next lesson.